Kennedy himself admits Negroes put him in office. Now he has the time to take a stand against U.S. Steel, against Castro, against Khrushchev, against Laos and South Vietnam and all these other places all over the world. But when it comes to time to correcting the injustices that are being inflicted against Negroes in this country, Kennedy sits up there like Nero.
Malcolm X, a name that has tremendously affected African American history and has stood as a symbol of resistance, truth, and unyielding courage. Malcolm had a childhood that was synonymous with struggle and turbulence. Despite his tough childhood, he rose to become one of the most influential voices in the fight for black liberation. During the mid-1960s, Malcolm X had transformed from a staunch advocate of separatism to a leader who promoted global unity against oppression and prejudice. The final months of his life before his demise would be characterized by betrayal, isolation, and a relentless struggle against the forces of racism and inequality.
Well, the exact I didn't leave, number one. I was put out, no matter, and since there was no justification for them putting me out, they had to make it appear to the public that I left of my own volition. But it was in February of 1963 that Wallace Muhammad, one of the sons of Elijah Muhammad, pointed out to me that his father had a very serious moral problem, which he had kept a careful secret up to that point. But that when I heard about it, I went directly to Elijah Muhammad. We discussed it. He explained it. He even admitted it to me, as well as to his some of his other children. He discussed it with his other children.
This is the story of Malcolm X's last months, a story of resilience even amid criticism, a quest for justice despite overwhelming opposition, and a legacy that was built in the face of unimaginable adversity.
No justice! No peace!
It's the first week of June, nearly 2 weeks after George Floyd was killed during an arrest by a police officer.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
After days of protests, Washington, D.C. prepares for its biggest Black Lives Matter march yet.
Let's journey into the events that led to his tragic assassination, as we honor his life and reflect on the lessons and legacy he left behind. Let's journey through the final chapter of a man who reshaped the fight for freedom forever. Malcolm X's association with the Nation of Islam contributed significantly to influencing his identity as a prominent black leader. However, by 1964, their relationship began to shake and became irreparable. Malcolm's unwavering dedication to truth and justice collided with the internal politics and moral compromises within the organization. The cracks in their relationship began to get worse when Malcolm uncovered allegations of immoral behavior against Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam's leader. Elijah Muhammad, who was revered and respected by many as a prophetic figure, was accused of fathering children with multiple young secretaries. For Malcolm, who was a man of deep moral convictions, these allegations were both shocking and deeply unbelievable. During some interviews, Malcolm made a statement, "I'd rather walk alone than follow a man I know is not right." This scenario challenged his loyalty and also forced him to confront the hypocrisy he saw within the organization. Following Malcolm's controversial comment on President John F. Kennedy's assassination in November 1963, the tension became more severe. His remark, "Chickens coming home to roost," was perceived as callous and sparked outrage all over the nation. The Nation of Islam distanced itself from Malcolm by enforcing a public silence on him. At this point, they had sidelined one of their most vocal and effective spokespeople. In March 1964, Malcolm officially announced his departure publicly from the Nation of Islam. He organized a press conference where he declared, "I am still a Muslim. My religion is Islam. I have decided to remain true to my religion, but I can no longer remain in the Nation of Islam." His decision marked a critical turning point, as he began to articulate a vision of black empowerment that extended beyond the confines of the Nation of Islam.
They had to make it appear to the public that I left of my own volition. But it was in February of 1963 that Wallace Muhammad, one of the sons of Elijah Muhammad, pointed out to me that his father had a very serious moral problem, which he had kept a careful secret up to that point. But that when I heard about it, I went directly to Elijah Muhammad. We discussed it. He explained it. He even admitted it to me, as well as to his some of his other children. He discussed it with his other children.
Malcolm's separation from the Nation of Islam wasn't void of consequences. He was faced with relentless criticism from former allies, and death threats became a reality he had to live with. In a certain interview, he stated, "I know that I'm a marked man. The price of truth is often very high." The isolation weighed heavily on Malcolm, yet he remained steadfast and dedicated in his commitment to justice. Despite the personal and professional toll, Malcolm's decision to leave the Nation of Islam liberated him to pursue a wider and more inclusive vision. His departure laid the foundation for the establishment of his organizations and a more global approach to fighting against racial oppression.
There's been great publicity given to the fact that heavyweight champion Cassius Clay is one of your followers. Do you think he's a sincere follower?
Well, Cassius is following Elijah Muhammad, and I'm no longer a follower of Elijah Muhammad myself. I do believe that Cassius is sincere in what he has been doing. I was with him during the 9 days, I think, when he was training for the list and fight, and he seemed very sincere. Whether he has understanding to equal his sincerity is another thing.
Why did you fall out with Elijah Muhammad?
Well, some internal disagreements and differences that I would rather not go into, but I think that they will come out in public before long.
These were personal differences?
Well, for one thing, I believe in the religion of Islam, and I went to Mecca recently to get a better understanding of it, and I think that the black Muslim movement itself, if it doesn't adopt the Sunni practice of Islam, the orthodox practice of Islam, that it will disintegrate and fall apart.
After parting ways with the Nation of Islam in March 1964, Malcolm X's next steps played a significant role in influencing the legacy he left behind. His disillusionment with the NOI's leadership and his desire to embrace a new course for black empowerment led to the creation of two significant organizations: the Muslim Mosque Inc. MMI, and the Organization of Afro-American Unity, OAAU. Malcolm's first initiative was the founding of the Muslim Mosque Inc., a religious organization aimed at offering a platform for Orthodox Islam outside the constraints of the Nation of Islam. Malcolm envisioned MMI as a community where spiritual growth could be harmonized with the fight for justice.
We then want to offer and explain the solution that God has given to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, which is complete separation and immediate separation of the slave master and his slave. And as Muslims here in America, we regard the condition of the black man here as modern slavery. We don't look upon anything that was done by Lincoln and those people back there as having any effect upon the condition of freedom or enslavement that the black people experienced in those days and times.
Unlike the Nation of Islam, which embraced separatism, MMI was focused on connecting black Americans with the broader global Muslim community. Malcolm's global outreach began to take shape as he forged ties with Muslim leaders across Africa and the Middle East, showing emphasis on the universality of the Islamic faith. While the Muslim Mosque Inc. focused on spiritual transformation, Malcolm's larger vision of black liberation required a political counterpart. The Organization of Afro-American Unity, or OAAU, which he launched in June 1964. This was inspired by the Pan-Africanist movements that swept across Africa. Malcolm envisioned the OAAU as an avenue to unite black Americans in their pursuit of freedom and dignity. Drawing from leaders like Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah and Congo's Patrice Lumumba, Malcolm's OAAU was focused on promoting solidarity between black Americans and oppressed peoples worldwide. OAAU had some specific core goals, which included self-determination. The OAAU was specifically intentional about the importance of black Americans taking control of their political, economic, and cultural futures. Malcolm described self-determination as the foundation of freedom, stating, "We must stop depending on others to define who we are. We must build institutions that reflect our identity and power." Cultural pride is another core goal of the OAAU. Preserving the pride of the culture is a key tenet of the OAAU. It aims at restoring the pride in African heritage. Malcolm believed that education and enlightenment on the history of Africa and its culture played a vital role in dismantling the psychological effects of white supremacy. Another core goal is global solidarity. Malcolm's travels abroad reignited his belief that the struggle for black liberation in the U.S. was part of a global fight against oppression and prejudice. The OAAU worked to build international alliances with African nations and other independence movements. Education and empowerment is another major goal of the OAAU. The OAAU gave adequate priority to community education programs and sought ways to equip Black Americans with the tools and knowledge to challenge systemic racism and inequality.
The purpose of our organization of Afro-American Unity, which has the same aim and objective, to fight whoever gets in our way. To bring about the complete independence of people of African descent here in the Western Hemisphere, and first here in the United States, and bring about the freedom of these people by any means necessary.
Regardless of his vision, the path forward was filled with challenges. Both MMI and OAAU struggled with limited resources and constant surveillance. The narrative wasn't a very pleasant one for them. The FBI's COINTELPRO program worked relentlessly to water down Malcolm's efforts, and also monitored his every move and infiltrated his organizations. The criticism Malcolm faced from both external forces and former allies within the Nation of Islam was unimaginable. Yet he remained persistent and pressed forward, understanding that the stakes were too high to back down. Though Malcolm's life was cut short less than a year after the establishment of these organizations, their impact was still felt for a long time, even today. MMI and OAAU embodied his transformation into a global thinker, someone whose ideas went beyond borders and inspired future generations of activists. Through the Muslim Mosque, Inc. and the Organization of Afro-American Unity, Malcolm X left behind a blueprint for resistance and empowerment that remains profoundly significant, even in this present dispensation. In April 1964, Malcolm X went on a journey that would transform his worldview and restructure his fight for justice. His pilgrimage to Mecca, which is prominently known as the Hajj, marked a spiritual and ideological turning point that broadened his perspective from a national struggle to an international fight for human rights. For Malcolm, the Hajj was beyond just a religious obligation. It was also a deeply personal quest to satisfy his curiosity and for truth. Leaving behind the controversies and betrayals of his past, he sought solace and clarity in the spiritual heart of Islam. Malcolm later described his arrival in Mecca as overwhelming, stating, "For the first time in my life, I stood before the Creator of all and felt the oneness of humanity. It was a humbling and life-altering experience."
Never have I witnessed such sincere hospitality and overwhelming spirit of true brotherhood as it is practiced by the people of all colors and races here in the ancient Holy Land, the home of Abraham, Muhammad, and all the other prophets of the Holy Scriptures. For the past week, I have been utterly speechless and spellbound by the graciousness I see displayed all around me by people of all colors.
One of the most significant revelations Malcolm experienced during the Hajj was the realization that Islam did not belong to a particular race. Witnessing Muslims of all colors and nationalities worshiping together dismantled his belief in the inherent division between races. He said, "In my 39 years on this earth, the Hajj has been the most transformative event of my life. In Mecca, I saw people whose skin was the whitest of white, and others whose skin was the blackest of black, all united as one. This experience made me see racism as a disease, not of the skin, but of the soul." During his Hajj, Malcolm wrote a letter home to friends and supporters, narrating his transformation. He wrote, "Never have I witnessed such sincere hospitality and overwhelming spirit of true brotherhood as is practiced by people of all colors and races here in this ancient Holy Land. This new understanding of equality inspired Malcolm to adopt a more inclusive approach in his activism. He was no longer bound by the separatist ideology of the Nation of Islam. He began advocating for a universal struggle against oppression. His interactions with leaders in the Muslim world exposed him to anti-colonial struggles and the importance of bringing people from around the world who are oppressed together. His time in Mecca and subsequent travels to Africa and the Middle East strengthened his belief that Black Americans' struggle was interconnected with liberation movements across the globe. In Malcolm's words, "The fight against injustice is not confined to America. It is a fight for the freedom of all oppressed people, regardless of their skin color or where they live." When Malcolm X returned to the United States, he adopted the name El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, which signifies his new identity as a reformed man and leader. His speeches took on a more global tone, emphasized human rights over civil rights, and appealed to the United Nations to hold America accountable for its racial injustices. His transformation did not mean abandoning the fight against racism in America. Instead, it gave more depth to his understanding of how interconnected struggles for justice truly were.
Malcolm X.
I think a lot of people are confused by the new Arabic name, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz.
I've always had the name on my passport, Malik El-Shabazz, I only used it in the Muslim world. Well, Hajj is a title that is given to any Muslim who makes the pilgrimage to Mecca during the official Hajj season.
While Malcolm returned from the Hajj with a renewed sense of purpose, the hostility he experienced also became more intense. His inclusive approach alienated some of his former allies, while government surveillance intensified. Despite these threats, Malcolm remained steadfast and relentless in his pursuit. He believed that his transformation was not just personal, but necessary for the broader struggle. He said, "I am for truth, no matter who tells it. I am for justice, no matter who it is for or against. I am a human being first and foremost, and as such, I am for whoever and whatever benefits humanity as a whole." The Hajj marked the beginning of a new Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, whose mission extended beyond the borders of America. His transformation during this journey was a demonstration of the power of faith, unity, and a relentless commitment to justice.
If I recall, I pointed out that while I was at Mecca making the pilgrimage, I spoke about the brotherhood that existed at all levels and among all people who were there on that Hajj, who had accepted the religion of Islam. And I pointed out that for what it had done, what the religion of Islam had done for those people over there, despite their complexion differences.
As Malcolm X's voice became more influential and his message more unifying, it became clear he was not only fighting for black liberation in America, but also for global human rights. This made him a target for detractors within the Nation of Islam, and also for powerful entities determined to silence him. Malcolm X had always been under the watchful eye of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Under its notorious COINTELPRO program, the FBI sought to monitor, discredit, and disrupt leaders it deemed a threat to the status quo. Malcolm, his fiery speeches, and growing international alliances became high on their list. Agents infiltrated his speeches, tapped his phones, and tracked his movements. Some reports even narrate how the FBI attempted to sow discord between Malcolm and the Nation of Islam by sending anonymous letters and spreading false rumors that would destroy his reputation. Malcolm X confessed, "I know they're watching me. I know my life is constantly under surveillance, but it doesn't scare me. It only makes me more determined to tell the truth." As Malcolm's ideology shifted toward inclusivity and global solidarity, his list of enemies began to increase also. Death threats became a part of his daily life. Many came from former Nation of Islam associates who perceived his departure as a betrayal. In a 1964 interview, Malcolm clearly said, "I'm probably a dead man already, but I'd rather die for the truth than live a lie."
I probably am a dead man already.
On February 14, 1965, just a week before Malcolm's assassination, his home in Queens, New York, was firebombed in the middle of the night. He, his wife Betty, and their 4 young daughters narrowly escaped with their lives in their hands. We don't advocate violence, but we do believe in self-defense. My family and I were attacked because I refused to be silenced, he said. In the early 1965, Malcolm X was standing alone. Friends and allies had distanced themselves from him out of fear or disagreement with his evolving views. Former Nation of Islam members painted him as a traitor, while government forces worked to isolate him further. In one of his statements, he said, "It is a lonely road to walk when you speak the truth, but it is the only road I know." Oftentimes, Malcolm spoke about his awareness of the danger he faced. He knew his life was at risk, but this awareness didn't make him enter into his shell. Instead, it emboldened him to make his final speeches some of his most impactful. "I live as a man prepared to die at any moment. They can take my life, but they cannot take the truth I've spoken or the movement I've inspired." Malcolm X's final months were characterized by relentless threats and ceaseless surveillance. Yet, he remained steadfast and refused to let fear dictate his actions. His ability to persevere in the face of mounting hostility laid his legacy solid as a fearless leader who prioritized justice over personal safety. In the final months of his life, Malcolm X's speeches took on a new tone. It became one of urgency, global solidarity, and a profound understanding of his mortality. He knew the forces were against him, yet he refused to be silent. His speeches made him one of the most fearless voices in the fight for racial justice and human rights. While he still fiercely advocated for the liberation of black people in America, his experiences abroad and his profound understanding of Islam had given him a wider perspective. In his groundbreaking speech, "Not Just an American Problem, but a World Problem," which he delivered on February 15, 1965, Malcolm highlighted the global dimensions of racial oppression. He declared, "The plight of the black man in America is linked to the struggles of oppressed people worldwide. This is not just a civil rights issue, it is a human rights issue." Unity became a central theme in Malcolm's final speeches. He emphasized the need for collaboration among oppressed groups to challenge systemic injustice. In January 1965, he said, "We cannot fight for freedom in isolation. The oppressed must come together. Black, brown, yellow, and all who seek justice must unite against the common enemy." Malcolm's speeches during this time were also deeply introspective. He openly acknowledged the dangers he faced and spoke of his willingness to sacrifice for the cause. In one of his last public appearances, he poignantly stated, "I have seen the handwriting on the wall, but if I can die knowing that I have done everything in my power to expose the truth, then my life will have been worth it." The Audubon Ballroom that took place in Harlem became the backdrop for some of Malcolm's final and most impassioned speeches. As he stood before diverse crowds, he spoke plainly about systemic oppression, the need for self-determination, and his hope for a better future. One of his most notable lines during this period was, "They may kill me for what I say, but they cannot kill the truth. The truth is eternal, and it will outlive all who seek to suppress it. I believe that the truth will set us free, not just black people, but all people who have been oppressed. We must fight not with hatred, but with intelligence and unity." The urgency in Malcolm's final speeches was a testament to his enduring commitment to justice. His words, spoken with unyielding passion, continue to resonate across generations, reminding us that the fight for equality is far from being over. His voice may have been silenced, but his message remains a beacon for all who seek justice, equality, and truth. The morning of February 21, 1965, was like any other morning for Malcolm X. But this day would forever be remembered in history as the tragic end of one of the most courageous voices in the fight for black liberation. It was a Sunday, and Malcolm was scheduled to speak at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, where his organization, the Organization of Afro-American Unity, OAAU, regularly held their meetings. The Audubon Ballroom was bustling with energy as over 400 people gathered to hear Malcolm X speak. In the crowd were supporters, community members, and families. A large number of them were drawn by Malcolm's message of empowerment and resistance. Despite the growing threats to his life, Malcolm had no intention of canceling the event. "I don't worry about being a marked man. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die standing up for what I believe in." Those were the words he spoke. Malcolm arrived at the Audubon Ballroom shortly after 2 p.m. Accompanied by his security detail and a small group of close associates, he appeared calm but focused. Witnesses recall him greeting attendees and spending a moment with his wife, Betty Shabazz, and their 4 daughters who were present that day. While the meeting began, Benjamin Goodman, one of Malcolm's aides, stepped to the podium to address the crowd. Some moments later, Malcolm took the stage to deliver what would become his final words. When Malcolm began to speak, chaos erupted. A commotion in the back of the ballroom distracted the audience. This was a calculated plot to create confusion. Suddenly, a loud sound of gunfire erupted. Malcolm X was struck multiple times and then collapsed onto the stage as pandemonium broke out. Witnesses described the scene as chaotic, with people running for cover while others rushed to Malcolm's aid. He was rushed to the nearest hospital, but at the time it was too late. At just 39 years old, one of the most transformative figures in American history was clinically declared dead. The news of Malcolm's assassination spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the black community and beyond. Many were left struggling with the loss of a man who had risked everything to speak truth to power. 3 men were quickly arrested and charged with Malcolm's murder: Talmadge Hayer, Norman 3X Butler, and Thomas Johnson. However, questions regarding the true planners of the assassination have lasted for decades. Many believe that Malcolm's death was the result of a broader conspiracy involving not only a group of people within the Nation of Islam, but also the FBI and NYPD, who had surveilled him relentlessly. Declassified documents have revealed extensive efforts by COINTELPRO to undermine Malcolm's influence. Malcolm X's assassination was a devastating blow to the civil rights movement. Yet, in his death, his message became even stronger. He became a martyr for justice. His life and words live on today and inspiring generations to come. "If I can die having exposed the lies and uplifted my people, then my life's work will not have been in vain." Though his voice was silenced, Malcolm X's truth echoes louder than ever, reminding us all of the power of conviction and the cost of courage. His family, friends, and allies found it difficult to accept the loss of a man who had dedicated his life to speaking truth to power and fighting for the rights of the oppressed. In Harlem, where he had been a regular patron, mourners filled the streets and tributes became countless. His widow, Betty Shabazz, struggled to comprehend the brutality of the moment. Just as the Nation of Islam, the FBI, and various political forces were left to reflect on his complex legacy. While some mourned, others felt a grim sense of relief, as Malcolm's unflinching commitment to the truth had earned him as many enemies as followers. Yet Malcolm's influence was undeniable, even in death. His message of black empowerment, self-determination, and unity was far beyond national borders and continues to inspire movements today. His philosophy of fighting injustice through both nonviolence and resistance has been a guidepost for countless generations, from the civil rights movement to Black Lives Matter. Today, the struggle for racial justice, equality, and human rights carries on with Malcolm's name echoed as a beacon of solid courage. In recent protests, Malcolm's image appears on signs and banners. His quotes continue to be quoted in speeches, in schools, and on social media. He did not only challenge the physical chains of racism, but also the mental and ideological ones that limit the possibilities for black people worldwide. Malcolm X was more than just a leader. He was a symbol of resilience, courage, and unwavering commitment to justice. You don't have to be a man to fight for freedom. All you have to do is be an intelligent human being. Drop a heart emoji in the comment as a symbol of honor for our legend, Malcolm X, Malik el-Shabazz. Like this video and subscribe. Let's uncover our history together.